here, then here, and then we are live. Welcome to the T-Force LCS Rundown. Another fantastic week. This is Motka Norum, joined this week by Optimus Tom.
How's it going, everybody?
Greg Credible Mushroom.
Hello, hello, hello. On my nice, sexy new mic.
Oh, you are looking very similar to the rest of us, I think.
Indeed, I just need that pop filter.
And Mitch Cereal Box Globetrotting. Where are you joining us this week?
I'm in Nashville this weekend.
You
But
are in
hey,
Nashville.
check this out. This is 2 weeks in a row with all four of us.
Wow, right? And it almost wasn't.
And one day I'll finally have my mic.
I know,
I'll actually
right?
be in the place where my mic is, even though I had it for the T-Force proper this past week.
You gotta get the you gotta get a carrying case. I have mine around here somewhere. I got like a nice silver metallic case. It's fantastic.
I have it. I just wasn't expecting to still be in Nashville this late in the day, but
I see.
happens.
Right now, actually, we are 2 for 2 in the summer split for having a full roster. We're on par with CLG. We're on par with CLG this split for having a full roster.
Wow. We are practically CLG. That's the new tagline. T-Force LCS.
And I'm a
Rundown.
fan of them. I'm a fan of them too, so
Practically CLG.
that's my new gamer tag.
Well, you can practically watch us every Sunday night shortly after 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, no matter where Mitch happens to be in the world.
I'm in Central.
We will always be here. That is at Twitch TV /T-Force Podcast. We are all tweeting individually and getting awesome Twitter stuff sent to us, cool fan pictures, and lots of interaction there. So that's great. We'll leave the Twitter handles for the end of the show.
Aren't
Feel
they?
free to
At your
Yeah.
do it.
join
Wait,
us. Join us every week. Join us in the Twitch chat, because we have Twitch chat going up all the time. We pay attention. We see the stuff that gets chatted on there. We'll hop in there every once in a while and play around. So if you're one of those people who are listening out there in podcast land, please come and join us on Twitch. It's a ton of fun. We always start a little bit after 9, so if you can't get there right at 9, or if you're not a super huge Game of Thrones fan, come and watch us afterwards. And maybe Optimus Tom will actually be in a bikini sometime.
There were no. I honestly looked for a bikini like Pone advertised, and there are no bikinis in my house currently. I regret to inform everybody. If
That's
you
a
guys
little
want to
sad.
send, if you guys want to send us a mankini, donate at tforcelcsrundown.com. No, not really.
We should say
If anyone can arrange for the actual Mankini to guest host the show, I think that would be excellent.
I mean, I'm in board shorts right now because I was just at the pool, but no one on the podcast land can hear us there or see that, I suppose.
Except
Yeah,
for when
sure.
I'm
you
not going to
just-
show it off either.
You
But
To be
just
honest-
adjusted your camera, and I was like, I thought you were pantless for a second.
Do you have
Oh,
short
yeah,
shorts?
I was
I'm
tricking
wearing
with something.
shorts.
Do it.
I'm not wearing pants. I always come in my bow tie, my shirt, my vest. But there's usually not pants at all. So.
Most likely, no pants.
Speaking about getting caught with no pants, Millennium this week.
Segue.
Major segue. What? I thought they were supposed to be good. I thought they were going to be our comeback kid story there. Oh, we're the worst. That we're going to crawl our way out of relegation, and then we're going to come in and we're going to win. And then they hit a wall. And what was that wall? I think that wall was Alliance. I love the super team. I love that concept. I'm glad that that's kicked in now.
Well, there's
Because
another one, too.
I remember all the Alliance hate from last split saying, no, Alliance is terrible. They're washed up. Super team sucks. Blah, blah, blah. They are dominating right now. But what did happen with Millennium? Talk to me. Tell me a story. Craft it with your words.
I've got plenty to say on Millennium. Does anybody else want to open up on this one first?
By all means.
I mean, we can preface it with the fact that not only did it lose to Alliance, who is on a huge hot streak, but you've also got Fnatic, who is consistent as all hell. So it's not like it's teams that are like really bad by any means. But last week they beat Super Hot Crew Rocket, who's looking just garbage now at the bottom of the standings. Beat Gambit, who is right above them, and lost to Wolves, also
Yes.
tied with Gambit. And then the one they beat that was, I guess, surprising. I'm trying to find it now. Super Hot Crew. I say surprising because Super Hot Crew is now in second place. So I don't think a lot of people saw that or were predicting that coming into week 2. But it's 2 weeks in. Like, that's going in 0-2 in week 2, I don't think that's a huge deal.
No. And I mean, getting onto your point where nobody expected it, before we kind of dive in here, the thing I find really funny about the EU right now is that the fans just can't get it right. Let's see, Fnatic versus Gambit, they picked 82% Fnatic. Fnatic loses. They called Super Hot Crew. Pretty much they're calling Alliance and SK right. That's to be expected. But they had Fnatic over Millennium. Wow, no, they won that one too. But it was when it came to Rockhat and Gambit, people still have a lot of faith in Gambit Gaming, which they're not doing the worst, at least not as bad as I was expecting them to. But they're just not the team that they were. And it's I don't understand why people still have faith in them.
I think
So
it's because of the
Millennium.
name. It's the name. That's about it.
It's Diamond Prox.
Oh, yeah.
I
Well,
love
they
Diamond
lost-
as
they
a
lost
player,
to-
but that
I've
that
gotta s-
organization's done, I think.
I've got to say, though, if you didn't tune into the EULCS and see the piece on the live show, highly recommend going to the LOL Esports YouTube account and watching the feature on Diamond Prox. Because Diamond used to be he used to be a giant troll. He was your epitome of, I don't want this guy on my team in solo queue. And it kind of followed the evolution of Diamond as a player and how he has to represent Gambit now that Alex is gone. And it was actually a really enlightening piece. So it's easy to see why people still put their faith in Gambit, especially from the perspective of that feature that they did. But when you put, when you put it to the test, Gambit don't look good at all. And I kind of feel like it's a lack of consistency, which I'm actually really surprised about. Because when we first went into EU this split, I was thinking that there were going to be 2 or 3 top of the table teams and everybody else was going to be way, way below them. And if you look at the table now, it's completely inconsistent. The only consistency that you actually have is Alliance. Everybody else, even Super Hot Group, who are looking really good, lost the game to Millennium. Millennium lost the game to the Wolves. The Wolves picked up a win over teams that they shouldn't have. It's super, super shaky. And so it's kind of relating back to just about the fans and the votes for them. It's really interesting to see. It's kind of people are just blindly going with who they think is the better organization, who they like more as a team, rather than who's actually going to win, because nobody knows right now.
So
Can I-
if nobody knows, why not vote with your heart?
I thought I remembered something, and this may have been quite a while ago, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I remembered a piece that was talking about the fact that Alex Ish was the be-all, end-all shot caller for Gambit, maybe a while back. But I remember something being talked about where he would call out every ability, or not every ability, but would be calling in order the things they need to be doing in a team fight. And that might have been all the way down to specific champion abilities to try to chain them together. And if you lose somebody like that, that's that integral a part of your team and has been there since the beginning of Empire to Moscow 5 to Gambit, that's a huge loss. And I don't know if that's the entirety of their problem, but starting 2 and 4 is not very Gambit-like.
I mean, I don't know. I don't see a lot of consistency right now. I don't see any team other than maybe Alliance and SK who's overly impressing me in terms of their, I guess, the cleanness of their wins.
So one thing I kind of like and dislike about SK is how consistently, they keep consistent with their strengths and their vulnerabilities. If you saw the ultimate summation of this is the game against Alliance, where Alliance was dominating SK for the first 20 minutes. And then they got a little bit overeager. They did a fight where they shouldn't have. They lost a couple members of their team. But once that 25, 30-ish minute mark hits for SK, they kind of just turn on the afterburners. It's all right, Svenskeren hasn't gotten our lanes going in our solo lanes like we wanted to. We've let Jesus and Freddy farm to a point, and now we kind of have to group up. And I think it really falls to N-Rated shoulders, because he is pretty much the dedicated shot caller for that team, if I'm not mistaken. At least he has the tactical insight as to their team compositions and how the picks and bans phase goes. He's a very prominent voice in that one. But it kind of just kicks into high gear. Once you give SK that little bit of a bite of your hand, they take off your whole arm. That game against the Lions should have been over at the 25-minute mark. There's no reason for it to have gone on as long as it did. And SK pretty much would have won that game if it wasn't for Shook being able to kick Candy Panda back into Alliance in that last team fight. Like, SK are so predictably consistent. They lose the early game, come back in the mid game, and then dominate the late game no matter who they pick. Even on early game picks like Freddy's Renekton, they still win the late game.
Yeah, I mean, they're still not far behind right now. That loss to Alliance hurts a lot, just in terms of putting them a game behind and then being 1-0 down in that series for the entire season against Alliance. But I mean, you saw that you could. We've seen that the whole EU LCS is always just a shit show, anyways, and it always gets mixed up. I'm not concerned for SK, but I would be surprised to not see them amongst the top 3 probably by the end of the season.
I mean, I think we'll see them go to Worlds. I don't. Unless
Well, we don't know the format yet.
What's that?
Do we know if it's top 3 to Worlds yet? I'm just curious. I don't know if that's actually been decided.
I'm assuming so. I don't
Because
think
I know they weren't going to make it.
Worlds.
They weren't going to do the teams going through to. They weren't going to have teams that didn't have to play group stages, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was something they were trying to fix, and I think that was evening out the numbers. So it might be like a 16-team thing.
Well, they had 14 teams last season. Yeah, last Worlds was 14 teams, where 10 were in the group stages. No, I might be doing math wrong.
I thought it was 2 from each.
Yeah, 2 from each group, 2 from each region, and there's the wild card, and then one from.
No, there was three North America, 3 Europe, 3 from Korea because they won the All Stars. There was one
from the wild card, which evened out the group stage because there were 3
well,
European teams.
Southeast
in the group
Asia,
stage.
Southeast Asia and China were missing from my list too.
Got it.
But I mean, that's all conjecture because we don't actually know. There hasn't been anything released, but we could probably assume that if you finish third, if you win that third place match in the playoffs, you'd probably be in based on past results. I would hope, but honestly, like that's a big deal. And you have to get to the playoffs first. And I'd say the big thing is those first buys. It's those first 2 spots that mean a lot more this summer split than they did in spring, because those first 2 buys mean you're 1 playoff set away from making it to Worlds.
Right. And we have a lot more LCS to play in the meantime. But I don't know. I see a lot of these teams needing to do a lot, not only just to get to Worlds. Getting to Worlds is one thing, but actually being able to contend and do really well is going to be a whole different story once we get in there. And obviously right now there's a lot of shakiness. Hopefully we see some of that settle out. I really, to be honest, I want to see Fnatic do better as a team and get the last split Fnatic back. I mean, I think once we have more weeks under our belt and we can kind of take a step back and look back, I'd really like to take a look at how the 2 teams who went to All-Stars, being Cloud9 and Fnatic, can come back into the split and look so sloppy. Like, is there something to that? Was the disruption, was the travel, was all that too much? Was it too crazy? Now they come back and it takes a while to get back into the swing of things. Is that a thing? Is that real? But again, mostly conjecture since we don't have that information in our pockets.
Well, one of the things about Fnatic, I kind of view Fnatic currently the way that a couple podcasts ago we talked about TSM. Mm-hmm. They come in, they've won every single split of the European LCS. Mm-hmm. They've made it to the semifinals at Worlds without their best player, arguably, in Reckless. They were using Pushu instead, who by all means I love Pushu, but he's not Reckless. He's not Reckless. He's a team fight AD carry, not a carry AD carry like Reckless is. But apples and oranges right there. They come in, they go to All-Stars. They don't do too well at All-Stars, but they won their European split. They're fine. They go into the European LCS, and it's kind of the same thing that we'll touch upon later in the podcast at TSM. Super weak. Their picks and bans phase was horrible. Mm-hmm. They just kind of picked things to play them and figured that they just beat everybody. Like, they had a piss poor attitude going into Super Week. And while I like the fact that Fnatic has won every single split of European LCS and they're consistently performers, I almost want them to kind of have to fight for that spot in playoffs to kind of just kick them in the ass and wake them up.
I mean, I guess, but to me, it's all about end game performance. You can have the coolest story in the world, getting to Worlds, like, oh man, we came back in, we were totally on our ass, like we were picking shit, then we pulled our shit together and we came out at the end, and now we're going to Worlds, and we lose. And we're heading back to EU. But we kept our lead. I'd like to see... I'm more impressed out of the stuff that's coming out of Alliance and seeing their cohesion as a team. I think they had a solid split to solidify. They did worse than maybe people were expecting and maybe themselves were expecting. And you're seeing a stronger performance coming out of them to start. Now, that's only to start. We're a super week and one regular weekend, if I'm not mistaken. Was there another week in there? There could have been another.
No, it's only 2 weeks.
Just the one. So who knows? It'll be fun to see how these weeks play out. But where we started, let's tie it back in there before we move on to the NA scene. Let's talk about Millennium.
I like that Tom said, "Hey, does anyone have anything else to talk about regarding Millennium?" And now it's 10 minutes later. But yeah, wrap that up, Tom.
Well, that was like a good overview of EU, and now let's just dive into what we were going to talk about.
I mean, Super Hot Crew is just all hype. That's all I got there. Go ahead, but I know Tom's got. I mean, that's my
fantasy league.
That was missaid. That was missaid. They're all hype because they're crushing right now. I didn't mean it as bad because they're only hype. They are doing very well right now.
You mean they are the super hype crew?
Yeah, exactly.
Crew.
Yes, there we go. Okay,
I like
you
that.
get off with a warning this time, Mister. I can't score points in fantasy.
Oh, I beat you this week. Boo, 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 boo. That was
we crushed. We crushed the proper though. We had first, second, fourth, and seventh.
Nice.
I am just heading up the caboose of that train though with 7.
No, we'll do an update of that at the
yeah.
end. We'll do an update of that at the end.
All right,
keep going, Tom.
Millennium.
So Millennium was really interesting. Coming into this week, like they had a pretty easy Super Week schedule by comparison. They didn't have to play anybody that was in the top 3 even last split. Well, there was Gambit, but they fell off anyway, so they don't even count. But they didn't really have to play somebody that really tested them, and they did really well, save for the game against the Wolves where they kind of showed some weaknesses. One of those things was when they fall behind early-ish, their only way of coming back is to kind of brawl with people. And while it made the Copenhagen Wolves game extremely messy, when you get into an established team that's like at the top of EU who knows how to deal with that kind of aggression, it doesn't really work out the way Millennium wanted to. Case in point was both of these games, they fell behind a somewhat pokey composition. Game number 1 against Alliance, they fell behind a Nidalee, Lee Sin, Lucian combination. Game number 2 against Fnatic, they fell behind a Nidalee composition that was backed up by a Thresh catch, a Trundle for disengage and the ability to stop them from going in, and then a Nunu to zone out and give his blood boil to Twitch that if they did get caught in that small area on an engage/retreat, the rat-a-tat-tat was going to absolutely obliterate them. So one of the things they don't really deal with all too well quite yet, which could just be signs of growing pain for a team that is kind of coming into their own this split just now, or it could be something of a glaring weakness for them, is when they get behind a composition that does well with like a Nidalee, with somebody who, like a Twitch, where if they are pretty beefy, you really don't have somebody that can kill them or get on them to disable them. They don't do too well. They fell off in their dragon control, and overall their compositions were a little bit wonky. Against Alliance, they had the Kog'Maw Nami kind of thing going on, and they had Trundle for themselves, but they paired it with Kha'Zix and LeBlanc, who kind of wanted to go in, so it was kind of half pokey, half disengage, half blow people up. And then in the second game, they picked a Karthus into a composition that didn't really want to fight on Karthus's AoE. So it was like, because they didn't get their advantages in the laning phase and they didn't have an early game lead, they just fell further and further behind. So when they tried to fight, it just wound up giving its Peke way too many fantasy points for my liking.
So, I mean, taking a look at some of Millennium's past games, especially in the Super Week. I mean, you have Ziggs, Kerp Ziggs, 11-3-6. Kerp on LeBlanc, 10-0-5. You follow up with this week's at a 1-3-2 LeBlanc and a 3-6 Karthus, and then of course the points that you were making about just the composition.
Kirk got banned out this week too. Ziggs was banned in most of those games, if I recall.
Right, and how important do you think Kerp is in the role of Millennium being able to pull out a win? Being such a high scorer in that position and actually being able to pull off kills, do you think maybe him being targeted like this is going to be a huge problem for Millennium?
Super Week MVP. Got to get rid of him. I mean, he was.
Kerp is a little bit interesting because he moved from the top lane position in the summer split last year into the mid lane. So he had all spring split to kind of get adjusted. And even though there's been some rotating champion picks of what's popular and what does well right now and et cetera, he's had his kind of comfort champions. He plays LeBlanc, he plays Ziggs, and Fizz. When Fizz is more of a counter pick to the fact that Millennium doesn't play Kassadin, to be completely honest. I'm actually really surprised that he didn't pick the Fizz against both Nidalee matchups. Because Fizz in lane will dumpster Nidalee. And that's the kind of lead that Millennium wants. And that's the kind of lane that Cotnex can gank effectively. Like, when you're playing Nidalee against Karthus, that's a farm fest. Like, where's Cotnex going to go? He wanted to maybe gank bottom lane, but let's face it, Krayaton was not on point this week. He just wasn't the Krayaton from week 1.
Well, all right.
So
I got.
I guess like the ending note is while Millennium did extremely well against one half of the EU LCS, they didn't beat what a lot of us on the podcast I think would consider the top 2 teams in EU, SK, Fnatic, and Alliance. They have to still be tested against SK, which I kind of think
next week, right?
Right.
I believe so, and that's going to be really interesting.
I think SK will take it.
I'm trying to do the math in my head right now of how many times they're going to be playing not top teams and seeing where they're going to fall.
Well, they play 28 matches.
4 games against each team.
Right.
So it would be 16 if you consider it only 4 teams being not top. But
I could see them being top 4. I just honestly don't know if they're the real deal to break top 3. That's going to be decided throughout the season. And I think it starts with SK because then they can identify their strengths and minimize their weaknesses against that team. I think that's going to give us a good judge of character. We already said Millennium is really strong in the early game, but if they don't have a lead, they taper off towards the end. So if they can beat the team that sucks in the early game and stop them from getting to that late game domination point, I'm ready to say that they kind of belong on the top half of the table.
You really think they're going to be top 4? Which of the current top 4 do you see them replacing? Because
they're top 4 right now. They're tied for top 4.
To be completely honest, going back to what we talked about with Fnatic for a little bit, I honestly want Fnatic to be in like 5th place come the end of the regular season. So they have to.
But do you really see that happening?
I could honestly see it happening. If Millennium were to step up their game, we already have the Super Hot Crew who I think are going to be at the top of the table. We have SK who's consistent and Alliance who's looking really good. Like, the only determining factor there is Millennium better than Fnatic?
I'm going to say a Fnatic who's on their toes and can take a game to a late game where their skill as individuals can kick in. Probably not.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I'm sorry. I know the Fnatic is having some troubles, but I really do believe they're going to rally. I think they're going to be top 3. I could see them overcoming... I could see either Alliance's momentum breaking or Super Hot Crew's momentum breaking and Fnatic getting their shit together. I don't think Millennium is going to be placing better than Fnatic at the end of the split. I don't see it.
I don't want to predict anything considering we went into a final week last season where it could have been a 5-way tie for first. So I'm not even going to say, I don't want to even pretend to say, hey, this is totally going to happen because of how much shenanigans went down in just one last week.
One of the things I do want to kind of mention about Fnatic is the game they played against Millennium this week went extremely well for them when they circumvented the laning phase entirely. They played the Nunu duo buddy jungle system,
which I
and
hate.
they kind of ran around, they completely avoided the laning phase by just being like this roaming gank squad and constantly contesting buffs. Now, Millennium, a team is not established enough to deal with that, crumbled at the aggression, which is a weak point for them, and something we talked about already is they're just not a cohesive unit quite yet. Now, if Fnatic were to do that against a team that knows how to respond to that, Fnatic essentially loses 2 players on their team to having no farm whatsoever, maybe even a third because their support all of a sudden becomes useless from roaming around and trying to help catch people out of position. And it was really interesting because one of the things the commentators mentioned in the actual game was it was very Season 1 style, which is the season Fnatic won. They won Worlds with roaming Alistar, with the roaming support, with the jungle pressure coming in from that, with completely deconstructing the laning phase. If you have a team that doesn't know how to do that, like a team that doesn't know the 4v0 lane swaps, they lose out in that situation 100% of the time. But is that strategy going to work against SK, against Alliance, against maybe even Super Hot Crew?
I think that's our EU. we gotta get onto NA. And
NA, the
Origins,
much
I
more
think.
interesting NA.
Well, I don't know. I
Well.
see a lot of. I'm excited for EU. I'm warming up to EU. I'm
Looks
starting
so
to get my
good.
favorite teams. We'll see.
But I mean, NA's
I
got
still
some
like
shakeups
everyone.
too.
Well, let's start our discussion on NA this week with actually some listener mail that came in. I'm just going to read this straight out. So, just how good is the new Dignitas team? Looking at the stats from the games against top teams in NA. Week 1, Day 2 versus C9. That's Dignitas versus C9. 28-minute games, 11 kills to 2. 9 to 5 towers. Week 2, Day 1, the most recent, versus LMQ. Total of 29 minutes, 17 kills to 3, 11 towers to 1. Winning in under 30 minutes against either of those teams is really tough, but winning as one-sided blowout games is even more rare. LMQ didn't get blown out like this in the NALCS ever. Are these
CL.
early split flukes, or does Dig have what it takes to go all the way?
So
Do
remember how we
do
were
we have a name
talking?
with that email?
It is
Charles
that
Norris.
person's actual name.
Okay.
So I wouldn't. Sorry.
I never said that. Hey, they say those all the time on the other podcast.
Well, we're not them. God damn it.
So remember how we were
What are
talking
their
about last
initials?
week that
Well,
Hey,
I didn't just
you
say
know
that.
who
Let me.
you are.
factor?
I'll make sure to let Pone take out that from the actual audio if that's a big deal.
No, it's not.
I know. I'm gonna make sure though, just in case.
So remember the show that we're doing. Hey.
What's that?
So, as we were talking about last week, this was going to be sort of the test to see whether LMQ was the real deal, or if their early success was simply because the North American teams just hadn't had the opportunity to adjust to them yet. And I think we got our answer in that Dig and Cloud9 dropped them.
Yes and no. I took really, really, really detailed notes on the Dignitas versus LMQ game. And a lot of what I saw come out of LMQ were just sloppy mistakes. But I think there's still something there. I don't think this is a
They're
team-
still good, but they're
Yeah.
no longer have number 1 on lock. I think it's looking
Oh,
much
God,
more
no,
likely
no,
that
no,
Cloud9
no.
or Dig might reassert themselves here.
No, I think there's a lot to Dignitas, and I think there's something there to LMQ. I think LMQ is the good... let's put it this way. If you're not a top team, if you're not Dignitas and you're C9, LMQ is the team to beat. Because LMQ, if you can top LMQ in matter, the deeper we get in, that's going to be the difference between you being on top of the other teams. They're going to be the gatekeepers to the top 3. Will I see them in the top 3? I doubt it. I think what Dignitas showed us in their game this week showed that there's a science to beating LMQ, and if you execute it properly by shutting down Zhao Zhao and having really good vision, I think you have the ability to beat LMQ if you can do it quickly, if you can be on the top of your game and not let their players get totally snowballed out. But that being said, I think LMQ is a smart team that can pull out really quick victories and will beat you down and be a major factor. They're not going to be like a curse, which is just terrible, and no one likes them. So,
Well, we talked about this earlier with Millennium, kind of the exact same situation. Not of course, Millennium wasn't a new team to the LCS, but they also didn't play a stellar lineup last week. They did. Millennium went 3-1, LMQ went 4-0, but LMQ beat out EG, CLG, Complexity, and Curse.
yeah.
That's nowhere near like a murderer's row of teams to play against. It's not.
You gotta
that
give them
crazy.
CLG. You gotta give them
CLG, of course.
though.
No, I'm not underplaying CLG. I'm underplaying the other three. But the same thing happened with Millennium.
Right.
They had one team that you considered to be in that upper echelon of teams, and then three that weren't. And so, if they'd done any worse than 3-1, everyone probably would have wrote off LMQ. But again, we're also talking about 2 weeks into a season that had Curse being the top team for, I believe, the first ever split. I think spring split last year Curse was the best team ever for, I don't know, until the playoffs. They were number 1 seed going in. It doesn't
like 2
mean
weeks.
anything. It's 2 weeks in.
Right.
Like I know 6 games in is not even a quarter of the season. I don't want to put any real stock into much yet. Those games matter.
Absolutely,
They matter
absolutely.
at the end, but
You're not wrong with that, but I see a lot of it going into momentum. And if you look at it from a week-to-week breakdown and you look at how bad a team can do 1 week and then you look at their next and they have 2 Titans that they have to take down, there is something to be said about the emotion that goes into those games. And are you going to be the kind of team who takes that when you're down mentality and flips that into positive energy where you go in and kick ass, somebody like Cloud9? Or are you going to take that, hey, we're down mentality and let it drag you down further? Some would argue, like TSM. It really depends. And obviously, like, we could be totally wrong by the end of the split. It's all total conjecture. There's new champions are going to get introduced this split, if I'm not mistaken, right? Brahm's going to be coming out for playability soon.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So those are big game changers that affect the whole meta as it stands. So if you're listening to this show, take it all for granted. We live by the seat of our shorts here because we don't have pants. But let's take a look at LMQ versus Dignitas. Dignitas is a good team to follow this week in terms of a storyline for NA because you have them facing LMQ, who obviously coming off that great Super Week had a lot going on. That also takes you into a discussion with Cloud9, and then you have a game against TSM for Dignitas, which tells you a lot about TSM. But I mean, when you really I broke down this game pretty heavy because I was pretty excited about it. LMQ versus Dignitas. Dig comes in and they totally ban out Zhao in the mid lane. They just took down a lot of his big players. They took away some stuff they really don't want to be playing against, like Yasuo and Kassadin. But LMQ comes out and they ban Jax, Morgana, and Lee Sin. So I guess a little bit of a respect ban on the Lee Sin side, but really it seemed more like these were bans of just champions they didn't want to play against. So right out of the bat, you seem like you have more of a prepared Dignitas, but just planning against Zhao. But the kicker, okay.
I'm gonna interject with a little pick and ban strategy.
I'm terrible at that, so keep going.
Dignitas banned out Kassadin because they're purple side and they have to, or red side and they have to. It's not a target ban. It's just no one wants to play against a Kassadin, especially when you're against like a Zhao. They ban out LeBlanc because they don't want to deal with Zhao's LeBlanc because much like a Kassadin, you don't want to play against a LeBlanc.
Right.
On LMQ side, they ban out the Lee Sin from Crumbs because it's what he's most comfortable playing. If you look at Crumbs' play style, he's about getting his lanes ahead early and controlling vision through mobility. Lee Sin, in his core item path, builds a Sightstone. So that is going to be the main jungler for Crumbs' choice because that's the most comfortable play style he wants to play. Jax is so Zion Spartan can't be on a dedicated split pusher that outduels everybody. It's so that they can worry. They don't have to worry about Zion Spartan taking up 2 people from their team. They could just send Ackerman over to him and be fine. And then Morgana, while she's a very problem support, is also something that Kiwi Kid has been playing quite frequently because, let's face it, Dignitas' strategy for at least the early stages of the game is still pretty Cutie Pie reliant. So giving him that black shield and free mobility in team fights is pretty important. So LMQ's bans, while they may look like they're just banning out power picks, that's the way Dignitas currently plays the game, is through power picks that suit their play style.
Okay. All right. See, I guess I don't have that perspective. I mean, you saw... I guess there's only so much you can do in picks and bans, but you saw Zion Spartan become a terror with Aurelia and just being able to straight up in 1v1, barely any jungler support, shut down Shyvana. I mean, he got a lot of love from the jungle up in top lane, but he didn't need to. There was no threat. He was able to TP into whatever lane he wanted and give support when he needed to. That was a great game for Zion Spartan, and I was pumped that I swapped out Soaz for him in my fantasy league.
Zion is deep enough that you can't really completely ban him out with just one. You've got to put 2 or 3 on him to limit his champion pool to something manageable.
Right, and that's
so.
I think that was the first successful Aurelia game I've seen in quite some time. You see her every once in a while on Europe, but
She's been dominant in a few games recently, but it's usually not. It's one of those things where it's really extremely dependent on the player getting fed.
Just watch Wicked.
Yeah.
If you want to see an Aurelia do well no matter what, just watch an Alliance game where it actually gets through.
Right.
Where it's not a permaban.
But, I mean, I saw some really almost embarrassing mistakes from LMQ coming into this game, and it made me feel like maybe they aren't going to be that super great team, but
nope.
Looking forward, I mean, I see it just maybe as a lot of, I guess, not taking the game too seriously, but kind of going line by line, the first blood that Zion Spartan was able to take. So all of LMQ decides, hey, we're going to go super north and try to contest their red. Oh, they're at our red. Let's come back down. Let's not ward our bottom jungle at all and get caught taking red. So first blood goes right away. Crumbs comes in, gives Aurelia the support, and is able to take down Zhao. Again, no wards. And Dig's got everything covered. They've just got great ward control on the map. I thought this was the game that Crumbs didn't buy the Sightstone. He usually does. He usually purchases that ward coverage, but he was spending a ton of money on wards, and it was totally playing out. Zion's able to dominate top and just 1v1 Shyvana and just completely take her down. Dig's taking dragons. Dig's coming in clutch with tower grabs and everything. I'm trying to frantically go through my notes here. The one point I did want to get to was there was a little bit of a struggle in bottom lane. The one thing that kind of kept happening is bot lane would get into an engagement and Kiwi Kid would go down on Zyra, which is, I guess, kind of expected because Zyra is a bit of a squishy champion. But, Cutie Pie was always able to wrap up the kills. I guess the question that I have, and this is totally ignorant, so feel free to come in and shut me down if you'd like, but how good is the bot lane of Kiwi Kid and
Cutie Pie?
Wow, yeah, Kiwi Kid and Cutie Pie, and I even just said it too. With all of the attention for Crumbs usually going to Shifter and Zion Spartan.
Cutie Pie is very strong. I still think Kiwi Kid is probably the weakest player on the team, but he does get the job done in that he gets he gets Cutie Pie out of laning phase into late game relatively strong.
I feel like Dignitas's bottom lane, if they were to match up 1-on-1 against as any other bottom lane in the world, they would consistently do nothing against the skill of the players. It's just they don't make flashy outplays. They do their job, which for Dignitas kind of works out. Like, more often than not, you don't have Cutie Pie and Kiwi Kid getting a ton of in-lane kills, especially without any presence from someone else from their team. You have them maybe out farming somebody or out pressuring them in lane, but you don't have them just like going up and getting kills and going ridiculously huge. Granted, some of the better bottom lanes in NA don't do that. Like Cloud9's bottom lane very frequently doesn't get a lot of in-lane kills against their opponents, but they get the job done to where they have to be for team fights. So while their bottom lane is very good, like, I would still say that there may be some other bottom lanes, like if we were to go on, especially on like a world stage or even just a multi-LCS stage, like with Europe and NA. Like I would put them in the top half. I wouldn't say they're maybe like one of the top bottom lanes though. I just feel like they do their job extremely well, and that's all they have to do.
They're not very explosive, but I will say they've got excellent synergy with Cyanide. Like the ratio of
Crumbs?
successful gank, or
Crumbs?
is it
Crumbs?
Crumbs. Sorry,
Cyanide's on Fnatic.
Cyanide's a Fnatic. Wrong LCS.
I
Crumbs.
was really
Yeah.
confused that I wasn't paying attention that much.
Whenever
anymore.
Crumbs
Good.
comes down for a gank, it's rare. Well, not rare, but more often than not, there's a very high efficiency of him having that gank be successful in the bottom lane. They're not spectacular by themselves.
I feel like
But when Crumbs comes down, they make the most of that time. So they clearly have something they're able to turn on. I don't know if maybe it's just a stylistic choice that they try not to make plays when they're by themselves so they can bait that jungler in.
it just seems like so much more attention has been given to Shifter and Zion in the top lane with Crumbs, where he's really trying to set them up for success as best as they possibly can. And then you kind of just leave Cutie Pie and down there to try to get him good. But the way I see it is if you can counter jungle Crumbs really hard, remove that ward control, and put a lot of heat down bottom to the point where you almost have to come down there and start alleviating that pressure, that might be the juice that you need to actually take down Dignitas. I think what's going to be more telling about Dignitas at this point, and I'm not really ready to say, I have some big questions still with Dignitas. I'm not ready to say that they're going to be a number one team. Is what happens when you do manage to really shut down Shifter and really shut down Zion Spartan.
I mean, we talked about that last week, I think. Think about the fact that it's the two lanes that are the most... They have the biggest egos just because they're all 1v1 every single time. And that was brought up because, Dig did pretty damn well considering they went 3-1, and now they've just shown it by beating down some solid teams in LMQ and TSM. So that it still remains to be seen. They've got, who's their last one? They got CLG. They haven't played yet, and I mean CLG is still solid in third right now.
Yeah,
but
they have CLG next week.
Yeah, they do. Everyone plays the last team they haven't played yet.
Yep.
First next week. So if they can keep that up and keep those solo lanes that are just have kind of been the catalyst, I think, just because what's changed? Oh yeah, it's two new solo laners. They've gone 5-1. They can keep up that synergy that they've already built. I think they're going to be in really, really good shape.
But shifting over to LMQ really quick, some more problems that I saw come through from this game was LMQ had just weird slow reaction time, and it almost seemed like some conflicting shot calling. And I guess Tom or Mitch, you may have a little bit more of history on LMQ as a team. Who is their primary shot caller?
I don't know on that one.
No idea.
Ugh.
I'm going to go with.
going
to go with it's probably no name or more, considering
Yeah.
I'm probably going to lean a little bit towards more, but I don't speak Chinese, so I can't really tell who's talking.
Sure.
Worst podcast NA. We don't know what it is.
Well, they're a new team, so that's to be expected. But I mean,
I'm
you just
Googling
saw
real quick.
you saw so many bad plays where there was one point where all of LMQ were just straight up face tanking mid, and Dignitas was just able to kind of slowly move in and peel 2 kills off that. went down and took. So they sieged their mid turret. LMQ was able, or Dignitas was able to go in and take down their second level mid turret, and I think even the inhib middle turret, and just slow calls where essentially LMQ just walks into bushes full of Dignitas players. It just seemed like nothing was really going well for LMQ. There weren't decisive shot calling. There were really slow reaction times, which that to me speaks more to a lack of shot calling and a lack of direction. A bunch of people wanted to do a bunch of different things, and just nothing going well. But on the other side, you have Dignitas, who's taking sweeping objectives, being able to cash in on kills, and just overall, like when you look at the team and what they do in their pre and post game rituals, whenever they do those LCS runs where they're doing the different cuts of the different teams, they've sung, they've had like sing-alongs in the pre-game the past 2 games in a row. Every single game, Skara comes out right at the end and is all hugs and cheering. I don't see that a lot from a lot of LCS coaches. That's a great team mentality to have, and they're just generally in always a good mood. I mean, one thing that they always have made note about Kiwi Kid and Cutie Pie is no matter whether they win or lose, they always have a smile on their face, and they always have that great attitude. And attitude being the key word there, I think when we've put really good players in this spot, I think you can take attitude a lot further than you can take critical skill like some teams like TSM. But before we move on to TSM, because I know we're probably going to want to spend a little bit of time hating on them, I got some questions for you guys about Dignitas.
I wanted to poop on LMQ a little bit.
All right.
Didn't we?
I haven't gotten a chance to say anything about LMQ
Well,
yet.
go for it. What do you got?
Well,
So I got an unpopular opinion about LMQ, especially after the first week of the NALCS. Everybody was saying, look what LMQ did. They took a game to the late game and they were able to win. They've gotten over the Chinese playstyle. Mm-hmm. Everybody looked at the LMQ game against Dignitas and they go, what is going on? Why are they walking into brushes? Where is the shot calling going on, etc., etc.? Here's the difference between a bunch of those games. Dignitas got first blood. Dignitas controlled the early game. Chinese playstyle thrives on the early game. If you want to argue with me on that one, go watch SKT versus OMG at All Stars. When SKT in games 2 and 3 controlled OMG's early game, the games devolved into one-sided stomps. The Chinese playstyle is extremely aggressive early on, and they use that control to go into the later stages of the game based off of a pure item and gold lead. LMQ versus Cloud9 today, they did the same thing. Extremely strong power picks in the early game with Renekton and Nunu combination. They controlled the early game, and then they wanted to go and end the game before Cloud9 could group up for team fights and outscale their picks. It didn't work out for them there, and when they lost control of the game, they lost the game. It devolved into team fights where Cloud9 was just outplaying them and better through champion picks, through the itemization, through everything. Same thing against Dignitas. You didn't win the early game. All of a sudden, they look scatterbrained. They don't know what they're doing. They're losing fights. They're not where they should be because the only way they know how to play is from being ahead. If you put LMQ behind, I don't think they're going to do well, which is why I don't think they're considered one of the top teams in NA, because I don't see a Cloud9, a current form Dignitas, a CLG falling that far behind. Well, besides the game CLG lost to them, I don't see them consistently falling behind LMQ in the early game for long enough for LMQ to establish that dominance.
I mean, is that kind of along the lines of, I know some people are talking in Twitch chat about this, the fact that Chinese teams were so used to ending games early, and I don't know. I'm kind of just asking this. Is it maybe because of something like that? They're used to winning the early game and winning the game before it gets to any sort of point where the other team catches up or makes it more even.
I'm going to say yes and no. I think LMQ, because of their time in NA, has a more structured late game than most other lower tier or even mid tier LPL teams. I feel like they have a better grasp on the end game because they've been forced to play it out more times than most Chinese teams. Another thing is, going back to the reader email, they're saying LMQ never got demolished that hard in the NA Challenger circuit, where you had teams like Complexity, who if their level 1 didn't work out, lost the game. Cloud9 Tempest, who didn't make anything happen on the map until 25 to 30 minutes. And they didn't have any teams that were together as long as LMQ was to have plans to control objectives in the early game. So LMQ thrashed through the challenger scene. Now they're against teams that can kind of step to what they're doing. And given the fact that maybe week 1, the team just weren't used to how aggressive they actually were or how controlling in the early game they actually were. So going forward right now, I could see them beating half the NALCS, but I mean, I'm really excited to see all these people like jumping off the LMQ hype train right now.
I think it'll be like EU last season. I think it'll be a lot closer than, hey, 2 teams are way way above everyone else in NA. I really want to see how close it's going to be.
I don't know. I still see it as going pretty tight.
I see top and bottom.
That's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean.
Top,
like
I didn't mean tight. I meant top heavy.
Okay, then yeah. I feel like we talked about this, I think, before the split started, and I think the 4 of us mostly agreed on a top 4 in some order of C9, CLG, LMQ, and TSM. Obviously, we've got a shakeup already in that.
Yeah.
So that could completely change again 2 weeks in, but
right.
We at least had something there that we said, okay, that could be a lot closer than previous splits.
Right. So I have a critical question for you guys. I was about to, before we got into the further discussion about LMQ, I did have some questions about Dignitas. I went back and I did kind of answer them. There were a lot about Zion and attitudes, and so we already hit upon them. There wasn't going to be anything new by that. But so here's my critical question, and I want you to really take a step back, and I want you to think about your answer before you answer. Okay, are you guys ready?
Let's go.
No.
Do you think your opinion has changed about TSM's new picks? Your opinion being, whoa, look at them. They got shot callers. Pew, pew, pew. They got amazing. They got
I said Glebe was a shot caller. I never said amazing was a shot caller.
Okay. That's fair. So I'm a little wrong. But what's going on?
Can we just real quick, can we please get, on radio shows where they have a little buzzer to announce that some part of the show's coming up? Can we please get a TSM perfect. That's the TSM button now.
We're going to do it. It's going to be 5 minutes. That needs
to happen every week.
It's going to be 5 minutes because here's what I want to have happen. And we're going to wrap up this week's discussion on TSM and just kind of looking at them as a whole. I know we've hit upon them a lot. I've hit upon them a lot. I honestly don't have a lot more to say about them just because what's not to say, you can watch it and just know exactly what I'm going to say. But I want to spend 5 minutes on that, and then I want to finish off this week talking about our league and everything that's going on there, our fantasy league. And I kind of have a fun idea for the people in the Twitch chat for very shortly after the show. So I'm going to throw up a timer here. Optimus Tom, go.
So TSM's problems right now, and I'm going to eat my words a little bit because I said that if TSM got their shit together, which they should have, they were going to be the top team in NA. So eating my words right now.
You got some crow.
Next.
Get some crow in your mouth. I mean, it's Game of Thrones time, but we don't need to make any more jokes like that.
TSM, their picks and bans phase is pretty much non-existent right now. They aren't picking characters that really go together, if that makes a sort of sense. And they're planning to dominate the lane phase and then win through that. And none of that is working. Like today, Amazing gets banned out yet again. surprise, surprise, all 4 of his junglers are banned or picked away. Instead of going to Nocturne, who he's played, who he won with the Copenhagen Wolves with, who he helped get through the promotion tournament with, he picks Volibear into a composition that Volibear could never reach. They pick Kog'Maw after the Nami is taken away, so the synergy is gone. So you have a Volibear and a Thresh who are trying to catch people, a Kog'Maw who doesn't want to be near people, and Dyrus who's on Shyvana who wants to dive into absolutely everybody. Your composition is completely scatterbrained. You're playing Lulu to try to synergize with the dive, with the catch, with the maybe save call. I don't know what's going on. Your picks and bans phase is horrendous. It doesn't matter what you're shot calling in the game because you're not playing as a team. And I am completely embarrassed at the fact that I thought they were going to be a good team now.
Whoa, Tom.
You're putting on a Makanora mask right now.
I
I feel like you
you're
just
missing. I think you're missing a really critical point. What you don't understand about TSM is that they're TSM. You have Dyrus in the top lane. Reginald's not playing, but he's still there.
He's on fantasy.
You got
right? You
General
can pick him.
Odd One somewhere talking about stuff.
Does Mock get like 12 times more drunk whenever we start talking about TSM? Because that's what it sounds like.
He
No,
just
I
gets
just-
he just gets power drunk off the fact that
I just
keeps
think-
saying his initials.
Fan
No,
drunk
it's
real
so stupid that I don't even know what to say about TSM anymore because maybe it was just that other teams were bad, but this is such a cocky and an arrogant team. I used to love them so much, but now it's like it's just almost clarity where you see all the mistakes that they've made in the past. I'm talking about the past now. In the bad shot calls, and you always kind of get out of that game and you're like, oh man, no, maybe if they just did this a little bit different, they'll go into the next one, they'll win. Then they pub stomp a bunch of kids, really bad teams, and they go on, and then they go up against real teams and they lose. And now you have chaos, you have new people in, if only they had chaos. You have new people coming into the fold who aren't used to the system. They're trying to become shot callers in a world where this team has existed for so long in its previous stance. I mean, where does it get better for TSM?
It gets better when they have a fucking support staff, and it gets better when their out of game decisions and their out of game planning reflect what they think they could do in the laning phase. Like, it gets me so mad when a team full of talented individual players like TSM, whatever you feel about the players individually, whatever you feel about their attitudes, they are good players, and they are among the top players in their positions in NA. But they play for their position, they don't play for their team, and their picks and bans phase right now seriously needs a Cloud9 Charlie thrashing or a Lemon Nation's notebook look over, because it seems like they're just picking things they want to play and hoping it goes together.
So let me ask you a question and answer this to the best of your ability. What motivation does an amazing player like Bjergsen have to stay
really?
with the TSM roster?
Come on, Claude, stop that. Don't say amazing when you're talking about. No, don't use amazing and another TSM player in the same statement.
But no, seriously though, what is? And I did that totally unintentionally. What motivation if they really can't pull it off? And I'm sorry, Bjergsen's a great player, but when you can shut him down, when you can put a lot of pressure on it, he goes 11 points in my fantasy week.
13
points in my fantasy week. So ending this discussion on something totally speculative. Why should Bjergsen stay?
You ready for me to get flamed on this one?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
Money!
Did you make it rain? Can you make it rain?
I made it rain.
This is live.
There's
and watch
the dollar
show, 'cause you'll get
There was a whole dollar bill that dropped from the sky.
I'm pretty sure I dropped like
Might have been two.
$13, one for every point Bjergsen got.
Yeah.
Oh.
At least he's not
Ouch.
amazing. Who only got 4.
I mean, I would say that you guys are putting down TSM real hard.
Yep.
I think
They
they
are.
deserve to be put down.
I know, and
They're putting them
all right, here's
down really hard. We're
I'm
just
going to
reporting
preface
on
this.
it.
I'm going to preface this with a disclaimer.
Okay.
I haven't gotten a chance to watch a lot of the NALCS because of traveling the last few weeks. But looking at the teams they've played so far, they've lost to the top 3 teams in the standings, and that's it. They're 3-3. They are playing LMQ next week to start out their season, to start out the week.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a big indicator because you can drop to really good teams. That happens. Like that's true for any team. There's been parity in the LCS, at least among the top teams, for forever. I don't think that they're down and out because they had an 0-2 week. It happens to everybody. Fnatic had a 7-game losing streak last year. You know what they did already.
It's how they get their 0-2 week, though. I would feel a lot better about TSM if they were going super bloody in these games and they were getting good plays and being able to take objectives and just thrashing the shit out of a team, but maybe it was one missed call and like just the game fell apart from there, and maybe it was like a missed fight at Baron or a team fight where they get 2 inhibitors down and then it all falls apart and they lose the game. I would feel better about that. But when Dignitas can just run in, siege the shit out of their base, take 3 inhibitors, get engaged on, walk out, back uncontested, come back in and win, like they did at the end of the Dignitas game, what are you doing? Like, it's not...
It's the fact that TSM, coming into this split, even with roster changes, was considered a top 3 team in NA. Now,
and
maybe we are...
Nobody believed that more other than TSM.
Yeah. And maybe we are being a little hard on them because even though they are a top team, they have undergone roster changes. But you compare that to a team like Dignitas, who's done the same exact thing. Dignitas, besides maybe the Baron throw they had at Curse, has looked a lot stronger as a team than TSM has. Mm-hmm. They're bringing in people that have not played before on the same team, and they are working better as a cohesive unit. That is the standard I hold TSM to. I think TSM should be doing that better because of their reputation in North America. That's why their fans will give them a hard time. That's why analysts will give them a hard time. Because the fact of the matter is, I think our expectations of TSM are a lot higher than our expectations of a Dignitas, a Curse, or even a CLG.
And
so that
to be
it's
honest,
disappointing.
Rightfully so. I mean,
I feel like we're getting angry at them because we want them to do better, not just to trash them, you know?
Right. And that is a lot. I want to love TSM again. I love the brand. I love
chanting TSM at inappropriate times.
And the thing is when was the last, like, you don't really hear that anymore because fans are kind of wary that, maybe this isn't going too well. And I feel like, I don't know. I hope they do a lot better. I hope they do get their shit together and start contending. And it's not just because I have Amazing and I have Amazing and Bjergsen on my roster, and they need to perform better than they did. But yeah,
do you want to transition this to the fantasy?
That was a good segue. I'm actually adding up the scores now to see who won.
Okay,
this week.
just in a quick point because it was talked about earlier, and this will just be real quick. Somebody Terminus posted in Twitch chat and sent me the link to find out I think only the Chinese section has been taken care of, but apparently there will be 3 slots for Worlds from China, from the LPL.
Oh, okay.
And there's a interesting just link that talks about how it'll work out. It depends on actually. What's funny is spring and summer both matter. LCS, take note. But
wait, what?
if it, like, let's say the LPL
Madness.
spring and summer team is the same, winners are the same team, they automatically go to Worlds. Otherwise, it becomes an interesting bracket format that we can link this if we want to later.
I believe it's
in the
top.
link.
I believe it's the top 2 teams from each split. Then, like,
yeah,
if it's like
top 2, and then they replace each other if there's multiple. It goes down to 3rd and 4th depending on how that works. But yeah, I'm looking at the brackets right now. I would need to actually look at it because there's a lot of Chinese characters involved too, which is making it difficult for me. But
so speaking of irony.
Just 3 spots, so that's at least news. So go ahead, fantasy stuff. Wait, we're not doing total numbers though. Why are you putting this in Skype chat?
No, I just feel I know,
crazy,
but
like...
just as an overall, we're gonna do 2 things. We're gonna talk about our league just for fun, so that people can sit there and listen about it. But for the people who are live here on the show tonight, I just dropped in a little thing into Twitch chat. I'd like to hear your fantasy questions. Tell us what you're struggling with on your lineup. We'll give you some advice. We'll probably won't have this in the podcast show because it doesn't really matter. But let's do it. Let's go into it. Okay, I see how you're doing the math.
Yeah.
The way our league is working right now, and for those of you who have not been paying attention, we are doing T-Force LCS Rundown versus T-Force proper.
Hooah!
Every week. Unfortunately, Greg was not able, for technical reasons, to get into our league, so he has been subbed out for Wrecker's penis. Just sitting there.
Which is ironically how
he just flopped around on the mouse the entire time and somehow picked a competent.
Ironically,
a better team than me. He picked a better team than I did, so that's saying not much.
Replacing Wrecker's penis in the LCS rundown is how I got here.
Right, exactly. So it's all coming back. And the way we did it is basically what point value you go up on through the week, that position, that order. So first, second, third, fourth. You get points for each, and the team that wins prize.
It's literally every week you get ranked first to 8th place depending on your points, and you get a score 8-1 based on that.
Right.
And
so this week we dominated.
Crushed. Thanks to not me.
22-14. Optimus Tom took first with 202.03. I skimmed just below him at 201.93. I was having a heart attack.
1/10 of a point, guys.
1/10 of a point.
I was having a heart attack earlier tonight because I was 10 points down from you, Mitch, because you and I got paired up.
Oh, wait, really? I didn't see. I have not really been paying attention to the.
It was the Cloud9 game, I think, that pushed me up and over.
Wait, what? I have 2 Cloud9 members. How does that make sense?
But it's my team. You have Rockcat. You lost 20
God,
points.
why did I do that?
Yeah.
Why did I do that? Tom, I hate you for talking up Overpow.
Overpow doesn't take dragons, barons, and towers.
The best part is
it's my own fault.
Your two Cloud9 matchups against your mid and your jungler is Cloud9. I have TSM. So my Amazing
and mine crushed that.
Yeah, I got 4 points from Amazing, and you got 30 from Meteos.
Yeah, but here's the thing: C9 had more points as a team than Meteos, and that's disturbing.
Really?
At 33-30, that's garbage. Also, you have. I mean, we can talk about individual points all we want, but this fact is, we dominated this week after winning week 1, not by a lot, but still won week 1.
Right. So I'm hoping we're going to get some questions in the chat. I think we probably should have prepped people for this ahead of time.
If it's fantasy questions, there's fantasy questions in chat going around. Like, I already answered one in the chat from Clutch Candy, who said, keep Kerp or make a big trade for Froggen. If anybody on this podcast disagrees that you keep the consistent Froggen, even though he didn't get as many points as his Pekka this week and has been playing utility mid laners, when Alliance is going to be potentially one of the top 2 teams in Europe, you trade for that sucker. If Froggen's available for some god-awful reason, you cap that sucker quicker than you put, I don't know, what do you put caps on? Soda.
Oh, so just a fun point. I looked up your matchup real quick, Tom. And Galib, do you know how many points he got, Mott, just because you're the TSM fan here?
He got negative points. That's awesome.
Negative a quarter of a point.
That's amazing to me.
Again, God, can we stop saying the word amazing on the LCS Rundown unless it's the person?
No, perfect.
Because this is going to be really confusing.
So there's
time.
That's sneaky.
I'm done. I'm gonna rage quit like Pone does every podcast. Just run out of the room whenever all the jokes come before he realizes he has to actually hit end.
There is a question tied into that. So, Nymph, Kiwi Kid, or Glebe?
Nymph, not Nymph. Those are 2
What
very
did I
different
say?
things.
What
You
did I
said
say?
nymph as the nymph. And it's something very different.
Actually, how does Nif? Let's see. Yeah, Nif. I would say probably. Nif or Kiwi Kid. I would put Nif in there.
Yeah.
Nif for
Not
sure.
Glebe. Definitely not Glebe.
No,
critic.
yeah, definitely not
Well,
Glebe.
I haven't
I
looked
thought that
at,
was given.
I haven't
Well,
looked
he
at the
asked.
matchups.
Glebe was listed in that. He said even
Yeah.
though it gave him the point negative 0.28.
I haven't looked at the matchups quite yet, and I might actually do. I did something on Twitter earlier this week where the day before EU started, I ran down who you should pick up if they're available in your league and who you should bench if they're available. So I might do that a little bit later on because I don't know the matchup specifically, but in a contained environment, Nif would probably be a better choice to run over Kiwi Kid like 8 times out of 10. The only other times would be if Kiwi Kid is playing the bottom 4 teams in the NALCS that week.
All right, let's see what else we got here.
I'm gonna get over the phrasing in a little bit.
I'm really upset that I can't play I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna say this every week because it sounds like so much fun, and I'm like
Just pretend you have
I'm
records.
that
Hey.
kid out there and looking into the store with all the candy and the warmth, and I'm out there shivering in the cold.
That's
Hey.
okay. You can bask in the glory that is me making the proper choice to run Super Hot Crew members and getting Mott to run
Yes.
Super Hot Crew members
Okay,
during their
You
dominating.
gave me no
This is-
advice.
this
you
is
gave me
the-
no advice.
This is the
ask
give and
for it.
take. This is
That's
the
true,
give and
I really
take of
didn't.
Optimus Tom. He goes into the split saying, "Fucking TSM, yeah, amazing. Bjergsen, great. They're gonna do awesome." So I picked them up, and that
Nice.
worked for a little bit.
1 week. out of
Yeah,
I
9.
also-
1 week. Let's
I
hope that's
also
the Super
said-
Hot Crew.
I also said that I expected NA to be a lot closer and that the fantasy is going to be very matchup based. So you could keep your selective hearing on. I'm saying that Bjergsen and Amazing should be they should be NIF. They should be consistent picks. I don't think that they're going to be the top scorers every week. One person I thought that should be a top scorer every week and almost made me lose this week was the fact that Froggen played Nidalee and Lulu and didn't nearly get as many kills in a single game as Xpeke did when he played Nidalee against Millennium. Same exact champion, same exact opponent. One was 8-1-8 and one was like 1-0-1.
Well, so let me ask you this then, since theoretically we're all working together to win. I have.
But they'll listen to this. They'll listen to this though.
Yes, they will. Adam's not listening to
What,
this
you just-
show. He's
Tom,
like,
are you
okay,
flicking us off?
they started. What?
No,
Tom just scratched the
I
top
have
of his
something
nose
in my-
and is scratching his eye with mostly his
I
middle
have
fingers. at
something
both
in my
times.
eye.
Okay. So my jungle spots.
Sneaky.
Spot of,
Oh God, I said it.
jungle is a big spot of contention for me right now. So currently, on my roster, I have Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All I have for alternatives, I do have Sven Skaren. He's waiting in the wings. And the only person available today on the bench that actually plays in the LCS is Snoopé.
He did kind of well this week, right?
He
one game,
got 26 he has 26 estimated points
He didn't
Next
have to do
week.
this
that
week.
well.
I thought he did really well in the first game against Complexity, though.
So, yeah, I guess all of VG did pretty well, but he wasn't really
Well, it's
one of
not
the top
saying
scorers. It was Pobelto and Enox who got a ton of the kills.
Right.
All right, so this is the way I'm going to diagnose it. Looking at the matchup specifically next week, SK has to play Millennium and Gambit. This could potentially be a big week for SK. Granted, they lost to Gambit, I believe, and they are playing against Millennium for the first time. This is the Millennium who we're still a little bit shaky about. Sven Skaren has a tendency to either help his lanes out in the early game and then towards the late game die a couple times, or die a lot in the early game and help his team out towards the end of the game. Generally, Sven Skaren has a record that looks something like 3, 7, and 15.
So he's bipolar, though.
Looking
Via the good parts of the game.
Looking at Amazing, TSM plays LMQ, a really big test for TSM as a team, and they also play Curse, which in theory should be free points for anybody on TSM, especially if you're Makanorum and you want to play someone against Curse.
To be
If you
honest,
don't
I was
pick
just
that,
I was
if you
actually
don't pick
just
that, Mott, if
I
you
was
don't
just
pick that,
looking at that. I was just looking at that, and I was like, shit.
My
Like,
my
I
gut.
still have faith that they can. TSM could be like, hey, we replaced Dyrus with a wet sock
With Mackinac.
because they sounded the same. So we're just gonna run with that. And I'm like, boom, they're gonna beat Curse.
My
Like,
gut feeling. My gut feeling is you play Svenskeren for consistent points. You play amazing if you want that big game boost against Curse.
Yeah.
I feel like from a fantasy owner perspective, I would probably play Svenskeren.
I'm matched up against, let's see here. Because I look at these on sort of matchup basis as well. Like, am I going to be able to get more points than them in this particular matchup? So I'm up against Chira. I'm pumped because he has Glebe on support. So my Aframu is going to do pretty well. But he is running Dexter in the jungle. He's got Sneaky and Balls on his team, which...
Hey, I beat him
He's
even
got
though his
sneaky
Xpeke outscored Froggen in one game this
Sure.
week.
But wow, he's actually got not too bad of a squad. He's got Balls, Dexter, Xpeke, Sneaky, Glebe, that sucks. Cutie Pie, and he's got LMQ for his team. So it'll be interesting to say the least. I'm pretty confident in my Cloud9 pickup. I've got Selfie and Mr. Rawls currently, and I got Zion Spartan. So I think overall it's pretty good. But let's hop over to let's do just these last two questions that seem to roll in, and we'll call it a night. So I have, should I drop J-Ree for Kiwi? That's the question.
Yeah, Pulp Fiction. I would drop Jerry for Kiwi Kid. Not because I don't think Millennium is going to keep up in performance, but Millennium, I believe, has a harder schedule next week. Millennium is against SK, and they have to play the Wolves, and they've lost to the Wolves already, so that could be a losing matchup. Kiwi Kid has to play CLG, which is a little difficult, and then Evil Geniuses.
I like that this is turning into like the fantasy football podcast where there's just questions coming in constantly via Twitter, except that it's a slightly lower number. Also,
Wait, are we
I
actually
also,
getting
hey
questions
guys,
on Twitter?
I have a good piece of advice because it's been true for the last for both of the first 2 weeks. If you have the highest estimated points or close to the highest for your league, you're not going to do very well. Nope. Because that's all that's happened for me. And guess what? Guess who's estimated to be tied for first most points this week? It's me again. So I know exactly what's going to happen.
And I think even though, like, I don't even know how you estimate these points.
I'm estimated to be last.
Yeah, I have
carry harder,
Bjergsen.
bro.
Bjergsen's still estimated. Every single week, he was estimated at being up and over 40 points, obviously with the exception of Super Week, because he was estimated to be much higher than that. But he actually performed then.
I have the highest individual point estimation for Froggen and Tabs in all of fantasy. It's 39 estimated points, but I have the least amount of points because all of my super hot crew players are estimated to have less than 20.
Yeah. Man.
I'm
looking at just like if I had the insight that I had today, I could have easily dropped Soaz, brought in Selfie, either Selfie or Svenskeren, and gotten an extra 50 to 60 points in that first week. God damn. Why can't I just predict everything
works out.
like Optimus Tom? All right, and one last question. We have... Ooh, maybe that was more of a troll question. I have Oh no, it's not. I was thinking odd one for some reason. I have Special and more, but I'm thinking about dropping one of them for We Will Failure.
I would not drop more.
We Will Failure.
Much as I love Special, I still look up to him as a player, but he's playing like ass. So
You
I
might
would
say
feel good
he's
switching them up.
cursed.
Oh,
And
Might
with
say
that,
he's special. And I should probably cut that one out.
yeah, he's kind of an odd one. With those bombs,
I'm throwing
just keep going.
this is going
With
bad.
those bombs, we will end the show for this week. Thank you for joining us again. We are the T-Force LCS Rundown. We are joining you every week live shortly after 9 p.m. Eastern Time, twitch.tv/T-Force Podcast. If you enjoyed this little segment of fantasy Q&A. We'll definitely keep this up. I think next week we'll maybe put a little bit of forethought into this, because I saw what prompted that was there were some questions coming in while we were doing the show about their fantasy leagues. So maybe we'll work on getting an email address for this where you can just send us our questions. We'll answer some of the big ones on the show, but for the most part, we can probably do some of those just in email. So I have been Montganorum. I am tweeting at Montganorum, MOTGNAROM. Joined this week by Greg Russo.
Hello, everybody. That's at GRRUSSO. Hit me up, Credible Mushroom and game.
Credible Mushroom. Also joined by the most optimal, the most optimist, Tom.
The most optimal, the most optimist, the most fantasy points. 2 weeks in a row.
Carrying us on his back, more or less. Who are you tweeting at, man? Come on, let's go.
At Optimus Tom. It's
Is it
below
below
me.
us? Well, I mean, hey, it's for all the people in podcast land,
In
though.
po-
All those
Podcast
people in
land.
podcast land. At
Yeah.
Optimus Tom, which is my name.
And Mitch Serial Baux, who still doesn't have it on his thing because I don't have Photoshop.
But for those who are wondering, it's at Cereal Box, but with
No one's wondering.
It's well, I'm gonna tell you
Wow.
anyways.
Heyo.
Yeah, it's true. But at Cereal Box, Cereal BAWKZ, it gets weird because people took that one. Also, I'm trying to get to 100 followers this week, so maybe I'll have something for that, like bad fantasy advice every 100 followers. Because I only
If
have
you
a
have
bevy of
alliance,
information
drop
on that.
them. They won't win that much. Nobody can.
Yep.
Oh,
If you want
boy.
bad fantasy advice, you could also follow at GGC Pwn, PWN.
Yes.
Yeah, he didn't do too well this week. Did he? No, he didn't. He got 183. Just slightly above Serial Baux. But this has been the
It was
T-Force
close.
LCS Rundown. See ya.